Hello, and welcome back to my dirty desk. And today I'm continuing my attempts to improve my hobby skills by trying to create my own Imperial Guard regiment. For this video I have something relatively quick, but not so easy for one such as me, which is painting camo on the cloaks of these Cadian snipers. Now these have been sitting in my pile of shame for a while now, and they are very old models. In fact, they are metal cast instead of the plastic that I'm used to, and while I may be showing my inexperience here, I didn't realize miniatures were made of metal when I bought them. I thought it was all resin or plastic. It's my first experience with metal figures, and I'll admit it's both kind of disappointing and a relief how this model doesn't need any assembly. Disappointing in that it's monopose and would be difficult to kit bash. On the other hand, it's impossible to screw up putting it together. I mean, all you do is put it on the base. Either way, I put the two together and primed them with the Army Painter's Gray primer, because it's the primer I had. Then I had to make the difficult decision of what kind of camo I wanted to put and what pattern. As for color, I decided to go for an urban camo type scheme at first, so a lot of shades of gray. But I wanted to add just a little bit of color and help keep it consistent with the rest of the army. So instead of varying degrees of gray, I went with a dark blue, a very light gray, and a very dark gray. As for the exact pattern, I couldn't decide on just one, and wanted to try multiple, so each sniper would get a different pattern with similar colors. Now, I'm not a stranger to putting camo on models. I've done it to several tanks with varying results. But I think my usual method of using masking tape or stencils wasn't going to work on a miniature miniature. So I'm going to try my hand at something I was dreading, freehand painting the patterns. And before I begin describing how I painted my miniatures, I'd like to put out a disclaimer once again. I am not any kind of expert with this stuff. I'm just someone who enjoys this hobby and is trying to get better at it. To start, I used similar yet slightly different shades of blue for each cloak because I couldn't decide on which one I wanted. Using the Army Painter's High Lord Blue speed paint for one and ultramarine blue for the other. For the one with a High Lord Blue, I decided to paint the camo with large, jagged splotches using Army Painter's Necromancer's Cloak, then drew in the outline of said splotches, whatever you want to call them, with Vallejo gray-white. Basically, I was trying to replicate the Khazarkin type camo. For the ultramarine cloak, I used the same two colors but put in a different pattern. With Necromancer's Cloak, I put on little shapes, for lack of a better term. Little squares, L's and T's, even just some thick lines here or there. I did the same with the gray-white, using similar shapes, but made sure that the different colored shapes intersect and overlapped with one another. Just make sure they overlap around the edges of the shape and not painting over them too much. Maybe have one or two on their own as well. Now, as we watch this sped-up footage of me finishing the models, I had said previously that I'd try to come up with some sort of lore to go along with the regiment and some of the models. While I have ideas, they're not fully formed yet, but I do have a concept of what their reputation may be. I want them to be known as bold, brash, and daring, with a love of big guns and even bigger explosions. This has given them a bit of a reputation as insane glory hounds within the Imperium, with other regiments having a sort of love-hate relationship with them. Many an officer's intricate plans have gone awry because someone had an itchy trigger finger. On the other hand, that same bravado has pulled victory from the clutches of defeat. The snipers of this regiment, the regiment whose name I will have to come up with at some point, are a bit different in that they recognize the need for subtlety and subterfuge. However, now that I'm done spewing my fanfiction, you're about to see that they still wear the stars and stripes with pride. Or as you could see in the thumbnail, you'll notice I kept the middle of the cloak free of any camo pattern. That's because I want to try to incorporate the stars and stripe symbols within the camo. Something I wanted to do last, as I wasn't confident in painting it freehand, and was trying to put it off as much as possible. I don't have as much to say for this part. As you can see, I simply tried my best to paint on a star and some thick lines for the stripes, doing the same for the other cloak. The rest of the models I painted as normal, which, for those who may want to know, was Army Painter's Elven Armor for the small bits of armor that could be seen, matte white for the clothes, and pure red for the stripes. Oak Brown for the bits of leather, Fire Giant Orange Speed Paint for the one with hair, who was also given Elven Flesh with Flesh Wash for, well, his flesh, while the other was given Crusader Skin Speed Paint for his, skin. I also put their camo schemes on their long las, as it just made sense to me. While I was finishing this little project, I realized maybe I should add something more than nothing to the base of the model. So I used Vallejo's Mud and Grass Environment paint, because it's what I had. I also put on little bits of mud to their cloaks to help sell that they've been crawling through the muck. I really need to expand my basing options, but that's for another day. And now I present to you my snipers. Let me know what you think in the comments below about the camo or the miniatures themselves. Regardless if those comments are praise or criticism, they are always appreciated. As well as the usual YouTube thing of giving the video a thumbs up if you liked it or a thumbs down if you didn't. I've got something a little more elaborate than a color scheme for the next video, if what I have in mind works out. So subscribe to see more hazardous building.